Watch this.
Politics have become a lot more partisan of late, which is why lately a lot more Idahoans have decided they want to have more of a say in their election fate. Longtime residents tell us why they joined the Republican Party for the first time this year, or left it altogether. Yeah, Idaho's coffers are more than chock full, more than $1 billion in surplus. An embarrassment of riches, some say, and you'll hear why they say that. Oh sure, prices at the pump have been slowly coming down after nearly 2 months of record highs, which brought shocking record profits for fuel companies. Taking advantage of their customers? It's a question we asked Idaho's Attorney General. It's likely part of your daily commute, but sneaking a peek at the price per gallon sign as you pass every gas station on your way to work or just wherever you're heading out. Or maybe you have access to that, interactive map that will show you the lowest gas prices near you. No matter which way the price moves, though, it's getting people talking. And today, we got some good news. AAA Idaho says the average gallon in Idaho is finally below $5. And while we're finally seeing those lower numbers, the Idaho Attorney General's office says profits for Idaho gas station owners, well, they've never been higher. The reason? Wholesale prices, what those companies pay to fill their tanks under the ground, are dropping at a much faster rate than we are seeing at the pump. Accusations of gas station greed are rampant. But is it that simple? Here's Andrew Bartline.
For the first time in more than a month, Idaho drivers can expect to pay $4.99 a gallon. According to AAA Idaho, the state average dropped below $5. However, that's still about 70 cents more than the national average.
Idaho's retail price is almost always in the top 10 for being most expensive. That's not something new.
Idaho Deputy Attorney General Brett DeLange is the Consumer Protection Division Chief. For the last 14 years, the AG's office has tracked the average gas price and the profit margin retail gas stations make per gallon.
What we're seeing indicates that the wholesale price is dropping has dropped fairly substantially, but the retail price hasn't followed.
KTVB received the AG's numbers through a public records request. They show the average Idaho gas station lost nearly 9 cents a gallon the first week of June. But since then, the price of a wholesale gallon has dropped roughly 49 cents.
We have never seen 67 cents before as a statewide margin average. And the average is somewhere between 10 and 20 cents a gallon. What you're seeing now is three times the average.
However, Jackson's gas station CEO John Jackson disagrees.
The 20-cent number that you're been quoted by the AG is total BS.
Jackson says most gas stations typically make 50 cents a gallon, and that's by necessity.
And I would like to see him try to run a business, our business, on 20 cents. He would go broke. I guarantee you, he's crazy. His numbers are ridiculous.
Jackson says his profits were down 57% in June. And while he's making more money at the pump in July, it's the items sold inside the store that keep him profitable.
Would it be true to say that when you buy your gas wholesale, the prices are going down for you, and in return, you are able to slowly lower your price over time as well for the consumer?
Correct. And we're not exactly going down slowly. I mean, I think we're dropping just about every single day.
Do you feel that it's proportional, that if the gallons you buy wholesale go down a certain percentage, you are then able to drop your price a certain percentage as well? Is it a very similar proportion?
Yes. This is a very competitive industry. What other business can you think of that has a price sign out on every single site that they operate on? I mean, it's very visible what our price is, where the competition is, and if you're too high, your volume dries up. I mean, it's extremely competitive.
The AG's office and Jackson don't see eye to eye, but they agree margins are even higher outside the gem state.
We're seeing it around the West, but also around the country.
We're cheaper than Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, Arizona. We do business in all of those states, and we know what the prices are, and they're significantly lower. And their margins are higher. They are always higher.
While the AG's office says there's nothing they can do today to directly deflate gas prices,
if the market will bear it, they'll probably charge it.
Consumer behavior is half the equation in a free market.
We need to maybe do a little bit better job of shopping around for the lowest price to encourage some price competition.
The last time the AG's office saw profit margins more than 60 cents a gallon, Governor Brad Little issued an emergency declaration in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, that action enacted the state's consumer protection laws where retailers cannot charge a, quote, excessive price for goods. The AG's office settled for $1.5 million with Maverick, Stinker, and Jackson. So we're no longer in an emergency declaration, Brian, so that's kind of irrelevant. It doesn't play into a role here. But the AG's office has proven in the past, of course, that $1.5 million settlement, that there have been some problems.
It's the story you just showed. I mean, that's a case of he said. I mean, who do we believe in this situation? The gas companies are saying, we're not making record profits. It's costing us more. But then the AG is saying it's never been higher.
Yeah, and I think one of the arguments they gave is, you know, when you buy the gas, you have a huge tank underground.
Right.
Maybe the wholesale price has gone down since. But for right now, that gas you're selling, you bought previously for a totally different price.
Yeah.
So that's part of it, too. There's a bit of a delay.
That being said, you also know this, that when the price goes up on gas that they paid a cheaper price for when the prices start going up. So it's conversely as well.
That was the AG's argument, as they're winning on both sides of this. The gas station says that's not true.
All right. I know what our viewers are going to say, so we'll stay tuned for that. Thank you very much, Andrew. All right, since the final numbers of the state budget surplus have been announced, we've seen a surplus of suggestions from you about how the state should spend it. Governor Little is looking at it like a big benefit, promising big tax rebates coming back. But the House Minority Leader is saying, well, the nearly $1.4 billion overflow shouldn't be celebrated. Joe Paris spoke with Representative Ilana Rubel today about this and getting perspective on, well, I guess that take, the minority side of how this budget surplus looks.
It's just part of the conversation. There's a lot of different ways you could look at this surplus. And back on Friday, we talked about the perspective, the view from the governor's office, the Republican governor's office. And it's interesting, though, we're going to talk about the two sides of the coin here. Back on Friday, Governor Little's office shared with us news about the final budget numbers for the 2022 fiscal year. Idaho is just short of $1.4 billion in surplus. And we've seen your questions. What can Idaho do with that money? Well, talking through the surplus situation, State Budget Director Alex Adams tells me that Governor Little is pushing to follow the model of the last few years with the current budget outlook.
I think he's talking about things similar to that for next year. Governor, in talking to him about the surplus, he's already saying, yeah, we've cut taxes 2 straight years, let's go for 3. We've made record investments for education, let's go further. So there's certainly a lot of opportunities.
Now, Adams adds that this is good to have a surplus as financial experts warn of an economic downturn across America, and we'll see how that plays out soon, for better or for worse. But with a lot of things, as we've talked about here on the 208 over the last few years, very different perspectives depending on where you're looking at a situation from. So while many are celebrating the budget surplus, House Minority Leader, Democrat Representative Ilana Rubel, she argues that the surplus is actually a sign of coming up short. She makes the point that budgets are a statement of what we value. And with that said, she points to Idaho's bottom-of-the-pack funding of public education, and the message celebrating the surplus sends to Idaho educators.
We have over 900 teaching positions we can't fill in the state because we're paying on average $18,000 less a year than the neighboring states around us. This is nothing to be proud of, that we have money left in the bank because of our systemic, dramatic underpayment of our teaching professionals. And really at every level throughout our government, we've been severely undercompensating. We can hardly maintain professors at our institutions of higher learning because they're being dramatically underpaid compared to any other state. We need to get up to par before we even start throwing a word like surplus around. We should not be using the word surplus when teachers are making $18,000 a year less than their peers in other states.
Now, to be clear here, Governor Little has made investing in education a priority and indicated, as we spoke about a minute ago, he wants to push for more investments in the arena of education. But Representative Rubel shares a different perspective, which is really interesting. And Brian, it comes down to really how you look at things like budgeting and surplus numbers, and perspective is really a whole part of this as well. Now, budgets, again, they show what we're most invested in and what we're most interested in. And so it tells a really interesting story. For example, also the surplus dollars, they also tell us the story of the financial impacts of so many people moving to the state of Idaho. The state budget director, Alex Adams, telling us that a major driver of the surplus is the corporate taxes. And with many businesses moving into Idaho, it's interesting to see how this plays out.
All right, we will watch that. Thank you very much, Joe. 9 days ago, on the Monday following the state GOP convention in Twin Falls, we had one of those GOP delegates here in our studio to talk about his proposed rule changes for Idahoans to be eligible to vote in the Republican primary. More restrictive rules, like you have to affiliate a year before the primary, not just a few months like it is now. Or if you left the Republican Party with a 3-year period before a primary, well, you couldn't vote. Or if you donated to more than one candidate of a different party 2 years before a primary, then you also couldn't register as a Republican. Well, none of that applies now. But Brandon Durst, the guy who told us this and was talking to us about this, he believes there was a large shift in party affiliations before May's primary, which led to a lot of non-Republicans deciding who should represent the Republican Party and led to his losing his race for state superintendent. Well, after we aired that interview, we had several viewers text in to say they were one of those primary party crashers, and even one who says she was so embarrassed with her GOP affiliation, she wanted out after what happened at the state convention. A few of them agreed to sit down with us and explain why they are now registered Republicans and why one of them isn't any longer.
I want my grandson to go, I like all these people just because they're people.
Bob Gross has lived in Boise for 32 years.
It takes a lot.
He spent 25 of those years as an environmental engineer for Micron. Last week, he sent us a text message. And you said, I'm one of the unaffiliated voters that changed to Republican. It felt good. I'm staying put.
Right.
What felt good?
It was nice to have a vote actually count, or at least I perceived it as counting.
You didn't feel that way before?
Well, I couldn't even vote in the Republican primary after they closed the primaries, so I was relegated to the general election, which is great. I voted, but I already had an idea who was going to win in a predominantly Republican state.
What changed your mind this year?
The Republican Party is trying to get even further away from the center. I believe that most people are somewhere in the center, a little right of center, a little left of center, but most people want to be somewhere in the center. I think it's just the loudest speakers on both sides that get all the attention.
That's the way it's always been, it seems.
It is, and maybe I've matured to the point where it started making a difference to me, and I'm like, man, I've got a grandkid now. I don't want this to happen. How do I want to say this? The separation of church and state, and I'm just seeing the church have such a big influence on politics that, and I still go to church. I just don't want those two to blend.
Meanwhile, Mike, if you had to describe your political beliefs to somebody, how would you do that?
Probably fiscally conservative, socially liberal.
Didn't want us to use his last name or show his face because you worry about ramifications for this, right?
I do. I run a business here in Boise. It's hard to hire, and this subject is so sensitive that I could have employees that see it and leave because of it.
You wrote and said, I've been a lifelong Democrat, registered as an independent until this year. I am now a fully registered Republican, voted against McCrazy and for Little, and will be registered as a Republican forever.
That's correct.
Why is that?
It just really irks me that I have to have people tell me who to vote for and how I can vote. And I have voted Republican in the past.
Mm-hmm. Has that been hard for you?
No.
Why not?
Because I'm trying to vote for the best person for the job. You know, I did have a bit of an agenda on this one. I definitely did not want Janice, I don't know how to pronounce her name, McGeehan, in office, so I registered as a Republican so that I could vote for Little.
When you say you will be that way forever,
mm-hmm.
You have no problem being a registered Republican?
None whatsoever.
Based on where you live, or just based on your politics now?
Just based on the fact that I want to vote for whom I choose. I don't want someone else telling me how to vote. And that's really the crux of it. You know, the fact of the matter is that if I'm registered as a Republican, it doesn't change what's inside my head. It doesn't change who I'm going to vote for.
Leon Powell registered as a Republican back in 2012, when it first became required to vote in Idaho's GOP primary. Why did you choose to be Republican when you did?
It's more conservative. It's more business friendly, and without businesses, you aren't going to have an economy.
Mm-hmm. And you don't feel like that's kind of the focus right now?
No. There's too much anger. And there's too much hate. And how can you respect politicians when they talk like they've been talking?
So Leon went the other way and left the party. Today, this 76-year-old grandmother drove to Ada County Election Office and changed her registration from Republican to Independent. Feels good to not be associated with them anymore. Good, but still sad. Still feel that way?
Yes.
Why?
They're insane. They're saying things and doing things that aren't proven, that aren't true. And it's, if you say it loud enough and long enough, maybe people will believe it.
So what you're saying, and based on your decision to change your affiliation, you're not proud to carry that Republican designation anymore?
No, it's embarrassing. The thing that got me really started, of course, with a lot of people was the abortion issue. I was in my early 20s in Minneapolis before Roe versus Wade. And it wasn't talked about, but there were back rooms that performed abortions. There were babies that were born without limbs because of botched abortions. There were so many suicides. The fear that a young girl had, especially in the late 60s, if you got pregnant, ooh, bad. They didn't know what else to do. There wasn't anybody they could tell or trust. There was no place to go. There was no Planned Parenthood.
This sounds like it's a close thing for you.
Well, it is, because I had a friend that was affected, a very close friend, and it hurts. And to go back to that, because that will happen. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Mike believes Democrats, or even those just right of center, are forced to speak in whispers these days, scared to speak out.
It's sad. Hopefully come this fall, we'll get some people in office that are a little more mainstream and not so far on the fringes. I'm not a real liker of the left fringes as well, or the right fringes. I'm more of a centrist.
Do you feel that part of the spectrum is being phased out or pushed down?
I definitely feel that the fringes on both sides are gaining a bigger and bigger voice, and they are very vocal. There's no doubt about it.
What do you think about this push by some Republicans, those on the far right, of making it even more restrictive to register and vote in a Republican primary?
I think it'd be a shame, because I think they would lose a lot of voices. But I know why they're doing it, because they don't want those voices. They want to keep a minority voice really kind of spearheading the charge.
Do you consider yourself a rhino? And if so, is that a good or a bad thing?
There's times that certain aspects I do feel like a rhino, like I'm just hiding behind, I'm a Republican. So I can see that, but at the same time, there's some values in the Republican Party that I agree with. I haven't seen much of them lately. I don't know when hate and bigotry became a value. That's one I really have a tough time with.
And so I guess your idea is to change it from the inside.
My little step, I suppose. I just want a voice in the Republican Party because I feel like they could represent me. And especially in Idaho, they do represent me. So why shouldn't I have a say in that?
Is there any part of you that says there's a chance?
Absolutely.
That you could go back?
Oh, absolutely. I don't know if it'll happen in my lifetime, but yes, it will get better. It may get worse before it gets better.
What would it look like to you to be better?
That there wouldn't be so much hate in any direction. When my kids were growing up, we had a couple of words that were stinkin' thinking. We called it stinkin' thinking. Hate was one and can't was the other. And that's stinkin' thinking. And that's what's going on around the country. And people are ho-humming.
Normalizing it.
Yes. Would I be sitting here talking to you if I didn't think it would get better?
Well, despite Leon leaving the party, the number of registered Republicans in Idaho has jumped lately. From January to April, with the deadline to change affiliation in time for the May primary falling on March 11th, Idaho saw 14,000 more Republicans join the ranks, but they weren't coming from the Democratic side of the ticket. April from July, though, there were more than 31,000 added to the rolls, and a lot of those coming from the unaffiliated faction. Well, as expected, a lot of you have a lot to say about gas prices here in Idaho, including what Mary said from East Boise. If what Mr. Jackson said was true about wholesale gas prices being so high in the West, how could Fred Meyer and Flying J lower their pump prices by almost 30 cents in the last couple of days? Shame on Jackson, Stinker, and Maverick, she says. Gas companies have been gouging Idaho drivers for years. The state has called them out and fined them for it many times. No refinery claim is garbage. Oregon closed their last refinery in 2008. In Ontario, gas prices are lower than Fruitland. A lot of these anecdotes out there about how gas prices are cheaper outside of the state, but again, it's what we're being told by these gas station owners and the Attorney General. Well, since the Democrats can't win because of numbers, everyone should register as a Republican in order to have their vote count, a sentiment shared by a lot of people. Again, those numbers are gone up, just not necessarily from the Democrats, just from those who decided to stay out of it up until now, and this year decided to make a point. I totally agree with the Democratic leader regarding our issue with paying Idaho's teachers. We really should be using that surplus to pay our teachers appropriately. We also still need to work on paying more per student per year in the school. Being dead last in the nation is nothing to be proud of, says Diane. Record investments in education. Did you really say that? Being 51st is indeed a record, but not one Idahoans should be proud of. Great show. Terrible theme music. I'm Walt. Hi, Walt. I'm offended. I picked that music.